Hello, guys. Thank you. If you haven't seen the last episode that we did introducing this course, we advise you that you do so. Also, remember, please share the content if you find it helpful with your friends and families. Now, let's get into it. So, this will be where we actually begin the course proper, as we begin with the acts of the mind and logical terms. We are going to be defining some terms finally. There are three acts of the mind that we are going to go through. They are related, but they are not the same. And it's going to be very important as we go on that we are able to recognize these acts of the mind. The first act of the mind is just simple apprehension. That's just like recognizing or defining terms. If you are a married person and your spouse has ever, basically had issues with you not listening, you always thinking about what to say next. This might be the act of the mind where you are guilty. Uh, when we're talking about simple apprehension, you are just listening to understand the terms. You are not judging it. It doesn't matter whether it's true or false. You just want to know what it is that's being said. Okay, it doesn't matter, that if somebody is pointing to the color yellow and they calling it green. Okay, you're just paying attention to, oh, green. You're saying green. Okay, are they right or wrong? That doesn't come up yet. You are just trying to cognize, just trying to understand what it is that's being said. We'll go into more details as we proceed. And then the second act of the mind is judgment. Okay, this is where now we are formulating statements that are either true or false. Okay, so this goes beyond merely recognizing the term. So in my example of somebody pointing to the color yellow and calling it green, when you move to the judgment side of things, that's when you're like, oh no, that they're not right. That's not green, that's yellow. Okay, so that's judgment. And then the next phase that we'll be covering, this is reasoning. This is where we are drawing conclusions from multiple judgments or statements that are either true or false. Okay, we will in fact, let us zoom in right now and see an example. In the book of Matthew, chapter 16, which right here I have an image of a blog entry that 2024, that's what, last year. If you haven't checked that out, you should check that out. So we've been in this neighborhood before. In that article, I was not dwelling on 13, 16. I was dwelling on what follows right after 16, where Jesus says to Peter, on this rock I shall build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail over it. So we've been in this neighborhood before, and that's why I'm sharing this. But let's just look at these verses to see how the three acts of the mind may come into play. I'll read very briefly. It says, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, which, by the way, for those Bible nerds, it may interest you to know that all through Jesus' ministry, this is the only time, the only recorded time that Jesus made the trip to Caesarea Philippi. And as I argued in the article, he made it deliberately because there's a crucial lesson he wants to teach. And that lesson won't land well unless he went through this journey. The journey itself, by the way, is I don't remember now, like 25 miles or something like that. So it's quite a journey. So he took them only one time, he and the boys, only so he can land this message about the gates of hell. Now, when he got there, right, it's interesting, right? Like Jesus, they've been walking for days now. This question didn't come up. But as soon as they got to the location, which is the perfect place where he can deliver the message he's trying to deliver, then he asked his disciples, what do people say? Who do people say that the Son of Man is? Okay, so at this point, the disciples are saying, some say John the Baptist. So at this point, it's more like a simple apprehension act of the mind. Okay, he's not asking them, also, are those people right? Are they wrong? That doesn't come up yet. Just say, you guys you're on the streets. You know your ways around the street. What have you been hearing on the street? What are people saying about me? What are they saying the Son of Man is? Some say John the Baptist, others say, Jeremiah, some say some of the other prophets. And then Jesus stepped it up a little bit. We got to go past simple apprehension now. We got to move into deeper realms of the mind. He said to them, but who do you say I am? Okay. At that point, that's not simple apprehension, right? When someone asks you a question, for you to reply, you necessarily have to move away or go beyond simple apprehension. You're not just apprehending what's being said. Now you have to respond. So Jesus is going deeper with the disciples and he's asking, who do you say I am? And of course, famously, Simon Peter spoke up and he said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Obviously, for Peter to say that, it's a judgment Peter is making. Peter is basically saying that it is true that you are the Christ. Of course, for the Jews, the word Christ is very loaded. It is the word Messiah. Every Jew in that century and prior knew exactly what that's all about. It's basically the word Christ there is like a summary of the entire Old Testament. Okay, there's the whole theology loaded into that. So for Peter to speak up and say, you are that Messiah that we have been speaking about forever, you are that person. That's a judgment. It's saying it is true that you are the Messiah. Okay. So again, in the introductory video, I spoke at length about how logic can be a very useful tool to help us tease and parse through various things. This is one instance. Okay, like I said in the introductory video, logic it's human. Logic it's we are wired up to use logic. Of course, we can use it wrongly. We can, we all stumble. Myself, even professional logicians can make mistakes, but that's not a reason against using logic. And as we can see, even Jesus here is summoning his disciples, requiring his disciples to step up and logically parse through alternatives to get at the truth. Okay, let's now zero in more on the three acts of the mind. As you may have already guessed, is the first step towards understanding. Simple apprehension. Okay, you're not judging it, you're just listening to understand what's being said. The mind is just whether it's right or wrong hasn't come into play yet. I just want to know, what are they saying? What are they saying? Obviously, if we make mistakes at this point, this early step, if we say it's the first step towards understanding, if we mess this step up, we may expect downstream effects. Like a very good example might be this. If you, let me see, hopefully this won't be too controversial. I know, depending on your religious experience and church settings, sometimes we have taught the idea of love at the exclusion of self-love, right? We have taught people that, love God, love people, and all of that is great. But it's almost like we have trained people to do those things while neglecting themselves. In fact, that the word self-love in some church settings might make some people throw up because it's almost like, oh no, you're not supposed to care about yourself. You're supposed to care about others and all that. Now, I'm not settling it here. I'm not saying one is right or wrong. That's not the point I'm making here. We can take that to the blog and settle that. But the point I'm making here is if your understanding of love is one rather than the other, well, it definitely, evidently will have downstream effect as you move on with your life, with your faith, even with your interaction with people and with yourself, right? If you subscribe very strongly that you are only supposed to love God and people, and God will take care of you. You don't need to take care of yourself. Well, it will show up. It will show up. It might even show up in your household. It might show up in how you treat your family. Because if you are others focused at the extreme of yourself, uh, 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 Paul will later say that nobody, like if you love your spouse, you're basically showing that you love yourself. Like, and nobody hates themselves. Well, if you believe you are supposed to love others, chances are you are going to also neglect your household. What I mean by that is, of course, you're supposed to love others, but if you believe you're supposed to exclusively love others at the neglect of yourself, chances are it will affect everything else. Okay. So the point I'm making here is how we understand these things. What is faith? If you think faith is that thing, that currency that connects you to heaven so that you can get all the material things you want for yourself, well, that will have downstream effect on other elements of your faith, of your worldview that is connected to that piece called faith. That's the point I'm making right here. And obviously, who you think God is, if you think God is love, that would manifest in downstream in the body of other elements in your worldview, in your faith. So it's very important. Simple apprehension. It sounds simple. It should be simple. It's the first step towards understanding, but errors can happen here. And if errors happen here, you can expect them to manifest downstream. All right. How about judgment? This is important. Judgment in this kind of logic that we are dealing with, categorical logic. Judgment, this is where we are you're making assertions as to whether something is true or false. I consider this very common passage from 1 John 4:8. God is love. In categorical logic, God is one term, one subject, and love is another thing that we are connecting together in this statement that we say when we say God is love. Now, remember earlier, depending on how you understand God, like for instance, there are some worldviews out there that probably think God is inanimate. Well, for them, this won't be true. Okay, but for you as a Christian, if you say God is love, you are making an assertion. So both God and love are different terms that we are combining in this sentence, or in logic, we also call that a proposition. Now, again, your worldview at large is going to inform the truth value. By truth value, we mean either true or false. The truth value of this proposition, of this sentence, is going to be dependent on how we define the constituent terms that are in it. Okay, this is where judgment comes in. Obviously, you can see that simple apprehension. Like if we don't understand what God is, if it's someone is speaking to us and we are clueless as to what they mean by God or what they mean by love, then we're gonna have a lot of problem making this judgment whether it's true or false, right? Like our judgment won't be. We will arrive at our conclusions on questionable or not airtight basis. Reasoning. This is probably what most people think about when they think about the acts of the mind. Reasoning now is the process where we are moving from acceptable truths or known truths to new truths. As we will show in the future, maybe next course, actually, I'm not sure, we will see that known truths in logic are what we call premises. And I think the British spell premises differently, but we'll roll with this. So known truths are premises. And by known truths, really, we mean the truths that the individual has accepted. Okay, you accept that it is true, okay, for you. Well, if you accept those truths, then you can generate new truths or what we call conclusion from those in a process called syllogism. We will be addressing all of these shortly. But that's what reasoning is. Reasoning is when we go from, so you can see that reasoning is building on judgment, and judgment is building on simple apprehension. So in judgment, that's when we determine whether a statement is true or false. Well, if you have a collection of true or false statements and you're trying to combine them in some ways, you can generate new truths. And that's what reasoning is. That's pretty much close to what logic is all about. And of course, if you are a student of the New Testament, you would know why this is very important, because 1 Peter 3:15 encourages us to be prepared to make defenses for our faith. We should be prepared to defend it. If somebody were to have a question regarding what we believe, we ought to be prepared to give them answers. Now, sometimes the answer might very well be, I don't know. That's okay. That's acceptable. We don't have to make it up. Nobody knows it all. But nonetheless, in order to do this well, in order to be able to defend our faith with clarity, logic, I can't stress this enough, is a tool that can help us get there. Now, let's define some of the terms that we will be using in logic. Again, premises are just statements or what we'll call propositions uh, that we have accepted to be true, or they are universally known to be true. Okay, it may not be true for everybody, but for the speaker in question, you accept them to be true. If you don't accept them to be true, then the conclusions may not follow. All right. And this, by the way, is an example of what is called deductive reasoning. Some people might also call it deductive logic. There are many forms of logic. We are not going to get into all of that. But the one we'll be focusing on here is deductive logic, where we are deducing, we are extracting, we are synthesizing new truth from existing or accepted or known truth. Let's go through this with examples. So these first two statements here, all who believe in Christ shall be saved. That's a statement that may be true or false, depending on who you're speaking with. Uh, that's a premise. Okay, it's a premise. This second one here, it's also a premise. Paul believes in Christ. Therefore, Paul shall be saved. Now, by the way, this right here, this structured way of presenting our reasoning is what we call syllogism. Syllogism is where you synthesize a new truth, what we call the conclusion, from accepted or known truths, premises one and premises one and two. And we are going to get into the anatomy of syllogism soon. We'll go through the rules of valid syllogism, how not to butcher it and what works, what doesn't work. We'll do all that to appreciable details soon. But so at this point, I'm just trying to introduce the terms and to define them. So the conclusion is the new truth that we derive, that we deduce from accepted truths, right? So if we accept that all who believe in Christ shall be saved, if we also accept that Paul believes in Christ, then necessarily, meaning uh, it cannot but be the case that therefore Paul also shall be saved. And I notice that if somebody rejects one of or both of those premises, then the conclusion doesn't follow. But to somebody who accepts those two, this follows. And again, this structured way of presenting it is what we call syllogism. And again, this very form of it is a form of deductive reasoning, deductive logic. All right, here's another example. All men are mortal. Adam was a man. Therefore, Adam is mortal. Okay, again, the first two statements there are the premises, and the conclusion is a new truth that we deduce from those two premises. The conclusion is true, the conclusion is valid only if we accept premises one and two. And by accept, I don't want to make this subjective and make it look like you can just manufacture what's true or not true, right? Truth is independent of us. But nonetheless, if somebody has reasons to reject or question those premises, then for that person, this conclusion wouldn't follow. All right. Obviously, that person may be right or wrong, but that's a different conversation. But that's the point I want to make. Here's one more example, just to drive home the point, from John 14:6. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Uh, he also says, no one comes to the Father except through me, right? Jesus said, no one comes to the Father except through me. Well, if those two statements are true, therefore, Jesus is the only way to the Father. All right, I guess I have to say something here because sometimes in some setting they find this conclusion offensive, that it's exclusive, it's all kinds of terms, all kinds of ways. People have come up with various ways to characterize this conclusion. Now, how you feel about it is irrelevant. As far as logic is concerned, this is logically tight. If it's true that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And Jesus did say that. And if it's also true that Jesus says no one comes to the Father except through him, well, then it follows logically that Jesus is the only way to the Father. So we're going to have to massage the hurt, the bruises later, but as a matter of logic, this stands. Now, the only reason why somebody may have questions regarding whether Jesus is the only way to the Father, the fight isn't with the conclusion. The fight will have to be with one or both of those premises. They're going to have to find fault with those premises in order to have issues with the conclusion. Nobody can accept premises one and two and then complain about the conclusion. That's not how it works. So you get in the gist of how logic works. If you accept premises one and two, you have no choice but to accept the conclusion. If you have trouble with the conclusion, then you must find faults with premises one and premises one and two. All right. We're gonna cut it there for today. I hope this has been helpful. Again, remember there are way more contents, over 100 entries on this website. You can check it out. Follow us on social media, and see you next time when we will be dealing with a new topic called categorical propositions. Now we are building up. We are building up this case of logic, and we are almost there. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.